Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, it's interesting that I have recently just did an update on Stephen Gibbs as I found out talking with someone that he had recently, or not really recently. It's amazing how you don't hear about these things, but I don't spend too much time listening to the pundit retards out there. But I heard he had died, and not that I'm overly surprised, but about a year ago he died. It's interesting. It was about a year ago. You hear things about a year later, or somehow it pops up. This happened with people like Michael Aquino, the infamous Satanist, and so many other people that kind of pass and you don't hear much about, I guess, unless you're in their little circle. But it is interesting. I've also got an email today bringing him up again, and I was just about ready to post my my new long report on Stephen Gibbs because of his death. I like to do this after people die, and I've done this before as well. I've talked about Stephen Gibbs. I've had many years of contact with him. Which is very important to understand. This is not secondhand, third-hand information. I built HDR units myself. I had other people build them. I sold the plans. I published all of his books and sent him money for many years for royalties. And I will get into how we split and everything else. But Gibbs was always a strange person and, of course, was contacted and coerced, and also was more than happy to join against me, even though it's amazing how people always bite the hand that feeds them. I pay these people. I paid him a lot of money for the HDR machines I sold, books that he got royalties on, all the stuff he couldn't do because he was mentally ill and certified by the U.S. government and on the government dole for being mentally ill. So you could call that, I guess, certified. Or, as he tried to portray it, and he certainly came off as kind of retarded. Of course, this didn't bother Art Bell, who put him on all the time. The whole idea is that, but they like stupid people, and they like to play these little games. And of course, Art Bell was 100% owned by all of the Illuminati, CIA, etc. Whatever those groups we can really call, they're involved in all these really negative practices, and everything that Art Bell ever did was put up by that. After all, he was a low-level security person in the Navy working on electronics, but he did have a clearance and was involved in different things, and when you hear some of his shows, he gives a little bit of insights in those things. But regardless of that, his whole way that the Art Bell show got started and what was that all about is covered in the book Seer. S as in Sam, E as in Albert, R is in writing, I think it's Sears, S again as in San Francisco. So the author of that book, who had 30 years working in the remote viewing business, is a fascinating book to look at. Well, what is the business of all this? Because you got to survive. How do you do it? So she goes into it and describes how to do it and, how she did it and how she got along and the people she got involved with, and being based out of Las Vegas, working with Bigelow, the other government contract person. So it has been alleged, of course, General Alexander, Russell Targ. These are all the people that have been basically holding hands with the criminal intelligence agencies for many years, and who manipulate at least this area. Whatever people are into that, I'm not sure who's into what or where, but certainly these guys are the public faces of that. So part of all this stuff, to understand how someone as innate and as nothingness as Stephen Gibbs, now I'm not sure how I found Stephen Gibbs initially or not. But I was publishing a catalog that was about 150 pages. Of that, about 30, 40 pages were what we called research reports, which were culled from sources all over the world and from rare publications, information that came out of, books. So this was all kind of cold, rare research information. A lot of things that were out of print, newsletters that were no longer available. And these have been collected by various people around the industry. An Al Fry, a David French. And I work with those people to a degree, but, they never really owned any of this stuff. And you could then started compiling. They were just compiled from other people. And I started compiling a bunch of my own research stuff. So you'd find something in an old magazine here, an old statement here, or you'd find a paragraph in a book describing something. And you'd put all this together in what we called research reports. And these we had over 1,000 that varied in cost from 50 cents to, I think the most expensive for these rare plans were $50 or something. And this was all stuff that was lost that nobody ever kept up with that I was trying to save at the time. Unfortunately, all these files have been lost. But the whole idea is, taken from me by criminals when I had to flee an area. So the whole idea is that this was a serious understanding of how things go. So when you talk about Gibbs, and I want to cover here specifically the hyperdimensional resonator, which was his tool that there's even this guy who's famous for copying everything, including Bruce Copeland machines out of Mexico, which I don't think he's out of Mexico. I think really where he's out of is this person has been linked to an old distributor of Bruce Copeland, a radionic manufacturer for many years, who died, 15, 20 years ago. This guy was his distributor in the United States. And apparently this guy took his operation and at least address-wise, and put it in Mexico. And I've even obtained one of his radionic instruments from the Mexico distributor. It's real junk, so I don't know. Copeland always built very nice stuff, so I'm not sure what's going on there. He apparently is incorrectly using the Copeland name, etc. But this is the dirty politics that I'm not sure too many people know about. You may not even care about it, but if you're in the radionic industry, this is part of what's going on. You got to understand my particular background. I know most of these older people who were very big in the 90s in particular when alternative science took off. The Tesla Society, radionics was making a huge impact out there as kind of a rebirth. And there was a whole bunch of very much alternative science things that have been cooking through the 80s into the 90s and then beyond there. So I was involved in this by collecting a lot of data, and my whole idea was, hey, look, let's have a resource where people can go to and do the research. And by getting good information, maybe somebody can come up with something on their own by taking this information, which is relatively poor, kind of crude. But what does that mean? It's a starting point. And, of course, I was selling this, and I was selling tens of thousands of dollars worth of these reports at the peak time, averaging around $40,000 a month, which is an awful lot of reports, as well as other information as well. I had a lot of contact with people, but, of course, this automatically makes you a problem, especially working with a bunch of problematic people that are basically bought off very easily. And, of course, it puts you up as a person to be harassed, which is what it's all about and continues to this day from criminal law enforcement and intelligence agencies who have plenty of time and money to harass people but don't have time and money to do any enforcement, which is why everything is basically, it's the Wild West out there because you don't really have any law enforcement. So all of this has to be understood in the bigger picture. But I had direct involvement with Stephen Gibbs for many years. I published his books, built and sold his machines for many, many years, paid him lots of money as well. And while I didn't have that much conversation with him, he was kind of strange and a very odd person who didn't seem like he was mentally there. One of his books that he wrote was Kabbalistic Numerology. He had, as usual, like most of these quackballs, had his bizarre own religious belief systems. Another one of those strange Christians. But he never really had any, to get it down to understanding, he never had any, he claimed to never have time traveled. He dimensionally traveled, he saw things. Well, that's totally and completely unprovable. Dimensional travel has no value if you're trying to prove something. If you can gain information, come back with something, whatever that may be, well, I guess it could help you personally, or if you can bring something back that has value. Similar to crackpots like Billy Meyer and other people who claim to have over 50, 60 years of contact with extraterrestrials, they have absolutely zero practical information. Zero, zero, zero. Did you get that? Oh, he gives you prophecies. 2 weeks from now, something will happen. Okay. So this is the kind of stuff. You don't get anything, and of course, there's never any demonstratable film or anything of any value. Billy Myers has some interesting photographs, but I'm not sure what any of that really means. And when he showed a ray gun, it looked like something out of a movie, and waved it around, but did not trigger it or show it in action. Yeah, looked like something that was made, which he was very capable of doing in his little workshops or modifying a toy or whatever. So this is what we run into there. There's virtually no kind of proof of any of this. And of course, this makes sense in a bigger factor, but I don't want to get too cut off in other things. Now, the hyperdimensional resonator was an interesting machine. As I said, I'm not sure how I saw him initially. Maybe it was ads for his books or so forth. But I used to do this all the time. I'd find somebody interesting. I was running a alternative publishing house, and I would say, look, I can sell these for you. I have an audience. I've spent a lot of money with advertising and other things. And we can take this, similar to what Amazon does today. Well, we can take this brick off your back. We print it. We ship it out. We do everything. We pay you a royalty. So we did this with many people and have done this even up until recently, where we, of course, like any publishing house, do that. Now, so he ended up writing a few books initially, and I think it ended up with 7 or 8 if we count in Kabbalistic numerology. And we printed these in less expensive spiral bound and in hard copy editions as well. And you can find these out there in different bookstores selling for lots of money. These are really well-made or handmade hardcover editions. Really beautiful little books which had gold embossed titles on them, etc. Gibbs was also hooked up with a few other people as well that we also published. But what is the HDR, the hyperdimensional resonator? Now, this basically started out as a radionic type machine. Now, what made this a little different is, first of all, it only had 2 dials, which means it's really not a radionic machine. Any radionic machine that is really less than 9 dials, you can't do much tuning with it. But it did have a witness plate, or not really a plate, a witness well. It was kind of a little cup, again, a plastic cup usually, which again is non-conductant. 2 dials, some switches that would turn on the magnet. There was a huge electromagnet connected to a T-magnet that put out huge amounts of magnetic electricity, and you were supposed to place this on your chest. And of course, it had a headband. And you were basically supposed to put the headband on, put the magnet on you, or of course, I guess you would tune it in before that. You would then tune into where you wanted to go. And as I said, the headband, which really was, and this is how he built it. We copied one of his machines when we produced it. Was a telephone cord, the ones that kind of, that twirled up, so when you pulled the cord out, it didn't get tangled. So it was, I don't know what you call that type of irregular from those ancient things. I'm not sure how many of you out there even know what a telephone looked at, but a telephone that had this kind of, what do we call that? Spiral, coil-like wire that connected the headphone to the base. So you could pull it out and back and forth without it getting tangled. This was supposed to go around your head, and that's all it was. It was actually a telephone coil wire. Again, something that is insulated. So there certainly isn't any electromagnetic energy going through there per se. Now, whether frequencies come from there or other things or not. Now, the actual circuit was an electrical circuit that he had in the unit to a degree, but it had some odd variances and some different resistors of different types. He claimed that a germanium resistor could produce all this stuff. And of course, germanium's known to be interesting, and it was used in crystal radios, etc. So basically, you would put something in the well. It could be even your own picture. You would dial in. And of course, with 2 dials, I mean, how much dialing can you actually get with 2 dials, especially if you want to try and produce time shifts? It's just not enough dialing. And there's 0 to 10 dials. So certainly, that isn't much of it. The electromagnet, of course, putting out huge electromagnetic energy like that could be very dangerous and could cause hallucinations, etc. Strong electromagnetism and wrapping coils around this very large piece of metal created this, and this was supposed to somehow break the dimensions so you could travel. Hooking it up to your head, of course, through this very primitive headband, again, was supposed to alter you to be able to give you this capacity. Now, and of course, the internal guts were nothing interesting, nothing different, and nothing special. And these plans were published for many, many years, and I'm sure people, if they want to, can go out and find these plans, and you can look at a schematic of it so that you can see what was in there. So there were no secrets there. There was nothing about it that was special or not. People were basically using this like people use radionic instruments of today. They're psychic crutches. All they do is focus your energy. Now, maybe there was some sort of brain distortion that was being created by putting a band around someone's head and electromagnetic on their body. We ended up to stop selling the electromagnetic with the machines because we felt it was too dangerous. This could cause problems and pumping strong electromagnetic energies and laying something on your chest didn't seem to me to be a safe thing to do at that particular time. Just didn't. And I'm not sure that that's really what time travel is all about. So if, it's like getting information by taking drug trips with ayahuasca, LSD, etc. They may be interesting, but what have you done there? You've created a mind journey that really isn't connected to anything in the physical reality. Once you distort your consciousness past a certain level, there's a level that you first want to uninhibit yourself. You want to open yourself up, go into a semi-trance so that you can break contact. We call this shifting out of common reality into a higher reality. Yeah, but once that's done, once you distort that, then you're bringing back bogus information that you have created within your own mind, which is what LSD, ayahuasca, and other things do. And while there may be some therapeutical uses for this, particularly with people that have strong mental disturbances, in terms of gaining any kind of high-quality information, nothing has been gained from it. And we've had close to 100 years of study in these areas. And what has been gained? What has been brought back? I mean, Terence McKenna, who died because he couldn't figure out how to cure himself from brain cancer in his 50s or even younger, gained what from that? He brought us back hippie knowledge. Oh, screw the man. Don't watch TV. We don't want to be part of this rock. All he's doing is preaching the same. He's banging the same drum and talking what is considered shamanism, which again has been around for thousands of years. Absolutely nothing new. He brought back nothing of value and had nothing to give anyone, and left nothing. And that's pretty much the problem with all these hallucinogenic drugs, even though a lot of people claim they've been helped by it initially, I should say, to help break them from regular society. And apparently this is true. I never had to have that. I broke from regular society by just looking at it. I saw the filth, the disgust, the corruption, and I said, I don't want to be no part of that. I don't need no drugs to show me that. These people were much more imbecilic, low-level, intelligent worms, so they need a little dopey. But the problem is when you track these people, you found out that they are not good people, they don't do good work, and they've learned nothing. So whatever start was there, maybe the start wasn't even worth the start. They would have been better being plumbers, English teachers, or whatever the hell they were doing, instead of getting into and screwing up what is considered the alternative research in metaphysics. So getting back into the HDR, so that's all it was. And you can see a picture of that in the video here if you can look at the design. So you have a headband, you have a witness cup, and of course the headband, as I've mentioned, was just a telephone wire from an old telephone, and you had this giant electromagnet and 2 dials, which, as I've mentioned, you're going to dial in a completely different time zone with 2 dials. Well, it seems to me this is very difficult. It's a little bit too simplistic, just as the internal guts of the unit is as well. And as I said, there's no use getting into that, but there's nothing special in the wiring whatsoever. So all of this has to be understood. What is the HDR, the hyperdimensional resonator? He got a lot of his ideas from Back to the Future. He had a flux capacitor, which is a made-up term in Hollywood that he talked about. So he would do all of this stuff and be highly influenced. It's amazing how a lot of people think that Hollywood somehow is getting secret information, that they know so much. And I wonder who started that. And amazing how this kind of brainwashing goes on, and it's quite fascinating how they want to give you ideas that the government is so advanced that they can do everything. Of course, there is no proof in the world that anything they can do. They can blow up the world 50 times, but they can't seem to subdue a bunch of people that don't have bathrooms and sleep on the floor. When it really comes down to it, I have a great question of governmental capacities, even though it does appear that the technology that we have is at least 200 years less than what the government has. And again, somebody is using it for their own personal gain or for their own egotistical whatever. So that appears to be true. And there certainly is some very interesting technology. And the minute any technology comes out, it's suppressed. So knowing all this, I was trying to get all this information out there. Now, you're not going to build a free energy machine. You're not going to cure people. But you can get information out there. And what the individual does and how that snowballs into something else is certainly interesting. I never believed Gibbs and what he told me, but I never disbelieved. I'm a show-me man. If you can get a can of dirt, stick a wire in it, and tell me that powers something, okay, let's see it. Hook it up to it. Hook it up to a TV or radio. Hook it up. Let's get some juice going. Hook it up to a air conditioner. Let's see it work. That's all I care about. I don't care about the science behind it. I don't care if it makes sense or does make sense. I mean, the science that we think makes sense doesn't make sense because it's so damn primitive. The joke of electric batteries, when battery power is really a joke. These batteries we're making are crap. If it's too cold or too hot, they don't work efficiently. All of the stuff that goes with it, they have a little problem with battery power. It blows up into a giant fireball. Even difficult to roast marshmallows on, unless you consider your head a good roast marshmallow. And there are thousands of people who have been killed by these electric cars, these miracles that the poor Nikola Tesla, they put his name on. That should not be legal. So they fouled him and stunk him up by putting his name on crap technology built by a madman Blofeld. So the whole idea is that we do have to really keep this well understood. So the whole idea is that I was there to try and get this out, and we did a lot of surveys. We got a lot of things out there, these publications, got to people to do things. But in the many years that I did that, was at least 25 years, nobody came forward and told me basically on any of the information in those. And of course, maybe a lot of people don't report back, but we were fairly public, but we didn't have internet. People didn't call that much because of the fact telephone calls were expensive and nobody trusted the phone. But, if you want to talk to somebody for an hour on the telephone, it cost you $50-$60. And of course, then everybody would call on Sunday because those when the rates were in half. But the whole idea is that people didn't use the phone a lot, and I did talk to many different people briefly, and what do you know? And I was always happy to talk to everyone as I am today, because I'm seeking to find somebody that really has something. And I'm more than happy to help people, to guide them in different directions with all the fantastic empowerment tools that we have. So the whole idea is that that's always been the case, but you didn't hear much back from anybody. And of course, this entire alternative community was very, very unfriendly, but they were also pushed to be unfriendly by criminal organizations wwho run everything. Who runs the world? Organized crime runs the world with gangs and guns. That's what runs the world. So it's amusing that they want to talk about the Illuminati's magical powers and all this stuff is nonsense. When it boils down, whether it's one gang or another, whether they call themselves Satanists or street gangs, that's what runs the world. And they outnumber everybody else by quite a bit. But you got to remember, those people in power have no interest in eliminating their job. It's like the pharmaceutical industry. You want to kill all viruses? Well, why would we possibly want to do that? Put ourselves out of business? I got kiddies. I've got a wife. I got a big gold-plated car. A yacht. I need my money. This is what you get into. I mean, it's really sad. That's the kind of mentality that human beings have developed. Instead of seeing the greater benefits of and forming what would be a perfect ascension world and everybody working for really what had value, no. How many toys can you have? How many other people can you hurt to get those toys? And this is a reality that everybody has to face. So the whole idea is that there is a giant community of people to stop the progression of anything out there. It's really sad, but it is very true. So I didn't hear from people getting good results from anything or people supposedly working on. I got calls from people who wanted me to fund their alternative energy things. And I said, well, that would be great, but we don't have the support to do that. We don't have huge amounts of people who are assisting this organizations and giving us money so that we can start very expensive research, which costs a fortune. So we did have the only organization like this in the world that had its own retail store, its own office there, which had radionic equipment in the front and other magical supplies. The only store of its kind ever in this world. Very, very interesting. But, as I said, this was pre-internet and everything else, so people didn't talk. But we were fairly well known and we were ignored. We were ignored by all the radionic organizations. Why? We were in top magazines with display ads. We were ignored by everybody within the industry because of the fact they were contacted and told not to work with us, that we were bad people. And, of course, they wouldn't think that. But, of course, that was followed up by a bag of silver. So the whole idea is that's the way it goes throughout life as it goes. So these people, not only were they not supported, even though I was paying them money, they were actually hostile to us and never really investigated anything. Why wouldn't you, as a radionic organization, seek out a company that actually has a store, who is selling their own tools, who is providing all this information? Why wouldn't you look them up? I've never had a phone call up to this time, now being in business for over 40 years, have ever gotten a call from the Radionic Association in England or the Psychotronic Association in the United States or any other organization for that matter saying, well, who are you? What are you doing? Even though many of these people, I had placed ads in their publications, not the radionic groups, but that is certainly a major understanding of what's happening in this world. So, and of course, this is done deliberately and not deliberately. So in terms of the fact that people in the industry are just weird. Now the HDR, that is basically all it was. So you got this big electromagnet that is, you're letting electricity through from the machine on this. You place it on your chest, you lay down with a headband on, and you've tuned it in already. Usually you put a picture of yourself in the well. I guess you could put a picture of tuning into it if you wanted to go to a particular place. You could put a dinosaur there maybe, and you would tune into a dinosaur to go back in that time. Maybe you want to put a picture of the 1920s. Yet nobody was able to do this. And as I discussed in my other previous lectures here, is the fact that it's very complicated to physically time travel in terms of sustaining yourself there. Because of the fact that you have no money, you have nothing. And where do you pop out? If you're doing it in your own town and you go back too far, well, there may be nothing there. And how do you get back? So you're using a time machine that plugs in. And that's the other thing with the HDR unit. The HDR plugged into the wall, used regular 120 current, went into this machine, etc. What happens when you go ahead in time? Is that electrical circuit you're connected to still there? So, well, you're gone 20 years. Did you pay your electric bill? I doubt it. So you're assuming you're coming back to the exact same place and everything else. This gets very, very complicated when you start thinking about the actual reality of doing this when it comes down to the, the day-to-day things, how you feel, how your energy goes, are you well when you do it, down to the common things. Where's your money? Where's your electrical source? So you go back in time, and depending on where you live, most likely your house and other things will not be there, particularly in the United States, who basically, if something's a couple of 100 years old, it is very old. So if you're in a building that was built 50 years ago and you go back 60 years ago, that entire building isn't there, including the electricity to there. So what happens? You pop up there and what? So these are all the nut and bolts reality of any physical operation you do that is conveniently not talked about. And the things I'd love to talk about people when they talk these stories. Well, what happened there? It's like the comic book, The Incredible Hulk. It's amazing that he had some of the greatest pants ever made, because none of the pants ever ripped off and his giant dong hanging out. None of that happened, and of course you always were able to do that. And of course Superman was able to keep his identity covered with just glasses and a combed hair. So these are the kind of things that work well in comic books, but not in real life. So the bottom line is there's nothing really special happening with that machine. Now, did I miss something? Well, maybe I did. But I sold at least 30 or 40 of these machines. I sold hundreds of these schematics to make them. Nobody ever got any results. And there's no results that Gibbs ever shown, talked about, or anything else. He told me he had never time traveled physically, that this was a machine that other people worked with. And, again, that was pretty much I've always been into. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe you can do it. I don't consider there's an authority in anything. The only authority is the guy that's actually achieved something. So did somebody actually do something with this technology? And it doesn't necessarily have to be you, the inventor. I mean, people use my technologies that I put out there to achieve all sorts of amazing things, to do amazing levels of empowerment and out there that they can do by using the right tools. So we have to understand that with the HDR as well. And that's, of course, how I sold things. I didn't sell things as a time machine. This was a research device that people claimed possibly could be used for something like this. Find out for yourself. Experiment with it. I mean, that's really the only matters, because if something works for me and it doesn't work for you, well, what is the value of it for you? Well, it's zero to you. Yeah, but it works for everybody else. You're the dumb pal. Well, yes and no. Yes, that is true. Maybe you can't get this technology to work for you, and many others can. But that was not the case. Now, the whole idea of having a workable time machine and going on the Art Bell show, which millions and millions, I think he had I forgot how many people listened to him at his peak. Was it 10, 15 million people that would listen to him at his peak? And of course, everybody knew about it and everybody got the information. Even Warner Brothers got the word of it, who in Napoleon Dynamite copied his machine and had him try it. Now, I don't know if they tried it or not, but Napoleon Dynamite came up with the results that everybody else did. It didn't work. So I don't know if that was some sort of silliness or a stab at Gibbs or not, because Gibbs told me that Warner Brothers called him. I wanted to make my machine, I think. Well, I'm not sure that was the case. I don't know if they were trying to get rights from you or not, but they went ahead and just took it anyway because you were kind of a retard. Not that I said that to him, but I said, who knows what they're up to? Hollywood is a very despicable. I mean, they just want to rip you off, make lots of money, and give you nothing. So, and of course, that's how most of the world is. Hollywood seems to be emphasizing that, and that includes all the news media. So the whole idea is what happens. After all these years of working with Gibbs and everything else, I was closing down my store and moving, and tried to get a hold of him and let him know that, your check was coming soon. I was in the process here. He was owed money at that time, and for his royalties, etc. It wasn't very much, but he used this as an excuse to go where? Well, it's very interesting that he went to a guy named Rick Todish, a guy who was kind of my competition, who's known for his basic junk technologies, and certainly, again, fits into the whole group of those alleged people that are involved with criminals and everything else. So he was another guy that never went out there and tried to say, hey, fellow radionic builder, but all he did was copy stuff. He copied my wish machine and all the other things that I put out there and went wet with that. And from what I could see from his technology and everything else, it was most of it, from what I allege, was all bogus. And of course, why would he end up with my competition? Well, that's because he was the bogus competition set up again to harass me and my organization, and of course contacted Stephen Gibbs, who of course at that particular time, of course, like everything else, they know what you do. They have your all of your communications are monitored and bugged, so to speak. So all that was known. So they brought in this scumbucket to come in and do that. And of course, after that, it went dead. He had no resources to sell this stuff, never did any good with it, and then that goes along with that. But after numerous times to contact him and try and work out what the problems were, he refused to talk to me. And of course, that always tells you who is wrong. And people that don't want to communicate, and it's never ceased to fail, people will not speak with you and go over what's going on. They ignore you because they have no intentions of listening to the facts. Don't confuse them with the facts. So we had that little problem with him, and of course then we cut off ties with him. Of course, I own rights to his books. I own the rights to his books even today. I published them. I have a contract stating that from him. It's the same old story. So, this is a guy who has been a thief all his life. He lied to the Social Security disability so he could get mental case stuff. So he claimed. I think there was more of a claim there, but that included... he used to tell people, I'll tell you how to do it. I mean, this is how open he was about it, because he knew he was working with the criminals, and these are a lot of governmental people. But he would tell people, I can tell you how to do that as well. He's trying to clarify that he wasn't crazy, certifiably. Now, doctors have to verify this. Now, I've known some people who've tried to get on disability for mental problems, and it's not easy, and it takes many years. And I don't know how long it took with him. I never got into personal conversations with him about this or had too much contact with him. We really had nothing in common. What he had in common was he was a goofball Christian with the Kabbalic numbers and, what the Bible codes, and other toilet paper such as that. So the whole idea is that I don't know how many years it took him to get on disability, but he was able to get on disability and get his paycheck, what he claims that he wasn't. So he defrauded the government to do it. Shows you his kind of state of honesty. And of course, he was just a disreputable liar from day one. He made up story after story. All of his books are very contrived. They're very simple, about 30 pages. And, it wasn't that they were succinct in 30 pages. What they were was just short, undetailed information. But he certainly didn't hide his HDR circuit, and that was available to anybody that wanted it. And you have to give a little bit of credit there. But the whole idea is that these were out there. It was available. I think it's in one of his books, and you can read about that technology. But, that's the technology we're talking about here. Gibbs, in one aspect, stated that he actually got this from so-called extraterrestrials, which is not what he told me, but his stories change all the time. He's hooked up with a bunch of other lunatic friends. Pat Reese, who is now working with... other goofball presses, put out a really bad book on psychotronic machines and so forth, not understanding the subject matter whatsoever. These are, again, rip-off booklets. Information she's written on different time machines. And it's amazing when you look into these books printed by Beckley, I believe, from... Yeah, Timothy Green Beckley, who's always writing these interesting little booklets, these sensational booklets. Um, and has been publishing alternative books for many years. I've always, they're always fun booklets from Commander X, and they have a lot of outrageous information there, and he's kind of a wild dude. But there's certainly the credibility factor and the documentation or proof of these things. But they're fun little books that a lot of people like to get because they're short booklets. There's not very many pages there. They have a lot of sensational information. Regardless of how good that information is, or one of the problems is the uneducated conclusions that these people draw, and that's one of the biggest problems we have. Is that maybe they do some research, but do they have the background to come to the right decision of what all that information means? And generally, they don't. So she got hooked up with him as well, and she's published several books through him, all of extremely low quality, of course. These are the type of things that, of course, come from his publications, which is interesting. The time travel stuff is hard to get, but how to convert any vehicle into a fully equipped time travel device. The flux capacitor explored. What else here? The number of subdimensions, the mystery behind vortexes. Well, it's all interesting information. And as I said, I'm a person who's, let's hear everything. Let everybody take it, look at it, explore it. The problem is we run into all sorts of things that really make nobody takes seriously because of the people involved with it. It's a serious problem when you have this lunatic fringe. And, of course, these people get supported. Why was Gibbs on government agent Art Bell's show numerous times, along with other spectacular, complete and total fantasy people like Ed Dames? Well, they're deliberately put there. The whole idea is that Gibbs, who's a big nobody, and the only reason he gained any kind of fame was the fact of to support him against me and what I was doing. Because he had nothing. He was around for years. I brought him up like I brought so many other people. Like that. They were given their start by me, and then they were kept going, plain and simple, by the fact to be an anti-force against me. And they were more than happy to do that. So there's a long list of these people. And instead of working with somebody who helped them out, who gave them money over many years, and work with them, all of these people are nowhere to be found today. And of course, if they wondered why their books didn't make it, is wondered why they never sold any of their books. Well, they never got involved in it. But of course, being pre-internet, it was a little difficult. But even with people that I have recently published in the internet times, really didn't get out there and do anything to market their books, and they were dropped. So, you've got to get out there and participate. And they were not really cheerleaders for the organization or anything else. They were easily swayed away, and they all have been bought off by these people and directly working with organized crime, which are involved in many political and criminal-making things. The entire radionic industry is controlled by Satanists who make a lot of money from it. And if you think that organized crime only makes their money in street gangs, well, you're kind of stupid. They are involved in all sorts of quasi-businesses, as even the mafia is, that they make money from. And all these street gang members, the hundreds of thousands, I would say there are many millions of street gangs out there which are working, they have to pay their people somehow. And to a certain extent, it's hard. There's not enough crime to go around, so they get involved in other things. The entire loan collection industry is all ran by organized crime working directly with the police department. That's how it works. And God knows how many billions and billions of dollars that is. So these are the biggest scum out there. And they break all the laws, they harass you, and they do it with the sanctity of the local so-called police department, who work with them, support them, and allow their harassment to go on, and they get paid by them. They also get involved with the fact of using them to do things like run cars into you, kill you. They harass doctors and lawyers who actually murder patients. This goes on all the time. So if you think this is some sort of game, people, you better check again. Think this is some funny conspiracy, some sort of situation comedy? This is not a joke. And people like this are used by these industries. The other thing is that Stephen Gibbs is a great idiot to put up there for time travel. Has no background, has I don't know if he even graduated high school, but has a very low mentality, knows very little. And if you ever want to discredit somebody because they're no longer a use to you, you easily do it. As I've just told everybody, this guy was mentally ill. This isn't a joke. This is proven by the government. He was getting a government check for being a schizophrenic, and God knows what else. He was on medications. He wasn't very well. So the whole idea is that's how the whole industry works, and you just don't get it. And it goes through people like Art Bell and everybody else. And this is an interweaving of a control and basically out-of-control government agencies that have unlimited money. The banks are involved in all of this who work closely with the organized crime. This is all part of it. And the police department, what do you think is doing all this stuff? And they're all getting huge cuts from it. And this goes on and has been going on for over 100 years. And these people will track you consistently, as they've done to so many people that they then, just like Rodney King, who 25 years after the incident, they murdered him. So this is how it goes, and this was all a police operation. So this is how all these things happen. And it's not very complicated, and people are very easily bought. Nobody has any credibility. And, of course, that means all them good little Christians. Oh, this guy's a bad guy. He's against Jesus. You wanna fuck him over, don't you? So the Christians will jump in there and be their scumbucket reality that all religions, and it's not just the Christians, obviously the Jews, the Muslims, the Mormons, they all do it because they're all cowards, and we all know that religion gets you nowhere. Religion and $1.50 gets you a cup of coffee and from, I guess, a vending machine now. So that's the kind of nonsense you run into, and something we have to be very cognizant of. So this is the reason why this guy is around today, and they produced by their unlimited funds, their huge groups of people that are out there on the internet and other places and in every single city that support people like this. Now, Stephen Gibbs is one of those. It's amazing they've got one of the biggest radionic practitioners out there who builds, copies a bunch of stuff. I forget his exact name there. Of course, has been a Carl Weltz, the Satanist supporter for all of it, against me. For what reason, we just don't know, except for the fact that he was bought off, just like Carl Weltz's organization, of course, was fully supported by all of these, quote, satanic groups. So as it had been alleged, all connected to organized crime, as it's alleged. And continues to this day as his old partner is an devout Satanist, which has been confirmed to me by others. So we all know, of course, why would that be any different? They're good partners. They're running this satanic organization, which put out this fraud of orgone, which actually is a toxic, deadly energy, the way they use it. And, of course, you have all these supporters and all these people come along acting like they're being harassed for doing their work while they continue to sell garbage that doesn't work, that's highly toxic. This is how it goes, people. And, of course, I doubt a few people will understand this or believe it. But let's get back to the HDR as I close things up here. And the bottom line is that the hyperdimensional resonator was nothing special. There's nothing there. Supposedly, someone has now contacted me saying they gave the plans to Stephen Gibbs. I will follow up on this after I talk to this person, but here again, Gibbs, who claimed he got it from extraterrestrials, lied yet again, and now we have proof that Stephen Gibbs lied because this person claims he gave him the information and that they were acquaintances. Now, I'm not sure what that means or anything else in the bigger picture. Again, it's hard to prove, but it does fit into the scenario. It fits into the scenario that Stephen Gibbs knew nothing about electronics or anything else. He couldn't build much of anything, and that's why he was looking for other people to build his design, which he never really put together well or at any decent quality. So all of this, we get into the fact that These are the kind of things that we have to understand in the bigger picture of what's going on. So here yet again, it comes out that Stephen Gibbs is a deceiving liar who didn't, this wasn't even his design. He got it from some other people. He put together and contrived this. Now, this other person has stated to me that he did not give him a time machine, that Gibbs took his information and made it into a time machine because that was hot at the time, because the movie was out there, Back to the Future, which was a huge success. And of course, this area of interest is something that you'll gain attention of once you get involved with it. And of course, people don't want to hear rational discussions. Oh, this is interesting tech. Let's look into it and see if it has any validity. People want to hear that you have a working time machine, and there's such suckers out there that they pay idiots like this hundreds if not thousands of dollars. It goes on, and they never seem to bitch at it. But you're not going to bitch about Stephen Gibbs, because Stephen Gibbs is protected by the criminal people that run this country. He's one of them and always has been, to be a shining star against the terrible organizations that I run and the terrible person that I am. So they take these frauds and they run them up to the top. Now, this happened, of course, with Carl Weltz and his organizations. It happens with people like Art Bell. These are people that are pushed up there. Terrence McKenna. I mean, the list goes on and on of people who are pushed ahead in the media, given breaks, got contracts, and after a while that just keeps going. Once you become popular, once they get your books published and you do all these new age fairs that they make sure they get you in with the top publishers, so you're assured a speaking point, you are assured to have success. And these people go on and on that way for long periods of time. So that's the way it works. And the people that are popular everywhere, whether they're big business people or not, are all people that are pushed there one way or another. All we have to do is look at the wealthiest man in the world, Elon Blofeld Musk. And this guy is a completely contrived person coming from his brother, who was in finance, who was connected to wealthy Texas people, and he was pushed out there. Elon Musk was thrown out of the financial organization he was in because he knew nothing about it. This is a guy with a degree in economics and a minor, apparently, and we're not sure about that. We're not sure about his degrees, period, in physics. Well, that's not engineering, that's not business management, so everything that he's doing, and certainly is not rocket science, where he's building rockets and everything else. Well, he's not building rockets, he's not an engineer, he can't build anything. Just like Tesla Automobiles, he didn't start that company, it was started by two other guys, and he stole it, right down to the name. I mean, this is a known fact, we have all that information out there. So he took over the country, forced them out, etc. And they've come out and talked about that. And of course, they're not too broken up, because I think they made, millions, if not hundreds of millions off of that agreement. But when he came into the financial organization, which eventually turned into PayPal, without him doing anything, had nothing to do with him, they merged with this group that then turned into PayPal. They threw him out because he knew nothing. He didn't have any computer background. He wasn't a computer scientist. He didn't know how to write anything. So he was just coming along with his brother and just sticking his nose into where he shouldn't be, so they threw him out. And of course, it goes on and on with everything he's ever done, because he has no background. Steve Jobs, that bastion of great company, had no background whatsoever. He only graduated high school. He never had any. He had no business training, had no nothing. He was the big mouth front leader for that company. So, and just a comedy of errors got him where he was. But when he finally got into Apple, which basically a bunch of big shots took over and then ran that company and produced it to what it was, he had nothing to do but being the aesthetics guy and some ideas. And this can be valued, but most people that are in companies like that don't find that to be very valuable. He would tell them how to design the cabinet, but we're trying to get it to work right. So they've credited him for things that he had absolutely nothing to do. Most of his money, Steve Jobs made from Pixar, that he bought from a movie producer of Star Wars. I can't think of his name right now. But he started that company. Steve Jobs had extra cash. He bought that company at the right time and maybe made some right decisions that company then made a lot of money, and that's where he made all his money from. But Apple was built by a bunch of very classical business people, and he knew nothing and still does to this day. Wozniak was the guy who was the physical builder who got that company going. So when we look at this, we have to understand, well, somebody put him up to it. Musk, all of it. All of these people don't really have a business background. How did they make it? And how are they then coerced into their particular positions? Well, like Musk, I mean, this guy was obviously pushed ahead and then one break after another. But, you can guarantee that he's 100% controlled in every single way and used as they want to. So it goes on and on with all these people. And the whole idea with the alternative community out there, it doesn't take much. These people have no money. Gibbs never had much money, never made much money, and lived on disability with the money that I gave him for many, many years, or he earned in his royalties, etc., which I don't really remember what they were. They never were that much in this particular area. But it was certainly income that he could use, that he was paid freely for. And, of course, didn't appreciate it and was quickly easy to turn against me, the person who was paying him, as has happened in so many instances. And these people who claim they are anti-everything are not anti-anything. What they are pro is being bought off criminals like they are and his associates. And this then extends to other people. They then take this guy and they then make a documentary out of time travel, talking with his associates, which was Pat Reese and this other guy whose name I can't remember, the crook thief that was a Norwegian airplane pilot, so he claimed, retired, who stole a bunch of money from me. And of course, Pat Reese was never a very serious person herself and really didn't do anything to propagate or assist the situation. And of course, in itself, put out a bunch of crap. She has no background whatsoever. She has no idea what she's talking about. She hasn't done any research or what the goo that came out of the crap of Stephen Gibbs. I mean, she knows absolutely nothing. And then, of course, she aligns herself with, bogus publishers like Green and others, so that, that publish very sensational stuff. So, I mean, this is what you run into. So the fact is that no one got any results. Nobody reported back to me that they did it. We had some interesting experiments, but they never worked with his machine alone. The few experiments that I worked with people on that were serious and tried to do this were things that were kind of hooked up to vortex areas and creating a grid. Now, what was connected to the grid was basically radionic machines that had more dialing capacity and multiple HDR units that were connected up to the same grid, the same doorway. This then was the way you could go in and out, because I mentioned, how do you get back? How does your electrical supply in? So what you wanted to do was create a doorway. So you create a doorway by building a particular, basically kind of a frame, a door frame made out of generally metals, usually copper plumbing, and you made a frame out of it. You then filled that frame with crystals and other things through that copper tubing, usually 3/4 of an inch. Put that together to make a frame, because you can do that with plumbing supplies. You then fill it with different things, particularly crystals. You wrap wires around it, and then you connect those to pretty much 2 HDR units and an additional tuning unit of a radionic capacity, so you could tune much more. So that's how you did advanced time travel. Now, this one person went out and got a professional dowser, dowsed out in the Sedona area where to do this, a very hot area, and was able to then have a interesting but totally unverifiable. So he never could really get controllable results, and of course that's what's important. He claimed that he did these experiments and then didn't remember what happened, tried a few times, and then apparently gave up. And then all of a sudden, one day, stuff was being delivered to his house that he never ordered. So he figured that he had ordered this while doing some time traveling work, which is interesting. I don't know what that means. Why would you do that when you time travel? Was that you did that deliberately so that you could tell yourself that you time travel, that when this stuff was delivered to you, this is a verification that you actually did do some time travel, which was done in a short period of time. Now, you're not talking about going back years or thousands of years or anything else. This was a few days, maybe even a few hours. I forget the exact details of this. It was about 30 years ago. And of course, I've had some people that claim they have done similar things like this, but when they do that or use the HDR unit in general hooked up to it, and I don't know if it was the electromagnet itself, but they would come back and they would be sick. They would go someplace, see something, they'd come back and they'd be sick. Now, I don't know if that's from the strong electromagnetic pulses that are really bad for you at that strength, or was this coming from the breaking of dimensions? I believe that the breaking of dimensions physically harms you, and you have to protect yourself and do so many other things. So this is part of the process of protecting your aura and so forth. But, this person did it more in the astral to semi-physical. And what happens when you materialize somewhere else and you're not with the machine and the machine is with you? That's a long extension cord to dimension 12. So how does all that work? And it's very, very difficult to ascertain what's happening here, yet fascinating. If these experiences are true, could they be honed? Could you tune this better? Is there ways of doing it? And make it very controllable? Because anything that's not controllable is highly dangerous, could be deadly, and ultimately, even if it's controllable to a degree, can you gain information and bring it back? Are you going ahead? What are you time traveling for? Well, this is something that generates an awful lot of interest. And what interest is that? Well, mostly, I guess people would look at the Back to the Future scenario, meaning you want to make lots of money. Okay, so you go ahead or you would get the sports winning numbers and then use that to bet on it in the future or whatever it may be. The stock market, what is stocks? You go ahead a year, and what are the stocks for that particular company? It could be now tens of thousands more. Let's say if you went back and saw what Amazon was initially, then that 10 years from now, Amazon's going to be up to thousands and thousands of dollars a share. So the whole idea is that this would give you great business. I'm assuming that's it. But there are other things that are much more emotionally and critically based to your reality. Death is one of them. Someone's killed in a car accident. Your child is ran down the street. Coming home from school. Killed by a drunk driver. Well, these are motivations, aren't they? So you can go back and change that. You can go back and make sure that person is not walking on the street. You can pick that child up at school that day. Without getting into other things. Well, maybe it's destiny. Maybe you can't change it. Maybe you can't change what goes on. I don't necessarily believe that, and I certainly would do my best to change it. Gives a damn what so-called laws are. You make your own laws of life as long as you're involved in it. That's really what this reality is all about, is creating your own destiny and not following along with whatever others tell you. So the whole idea is that you could then do that. Save your child, save your mother, save your wife, save anybody, invest in things. Well, this is what people want to do. So it has to be very controllable. If you're going to go back and save somebody, it means you're going to have to go back to the day before or whatever, and you're going to have to, or minutes before. Can you control it? Can you tune a radionic device to transpose yourself an hour before the incident? And what happens when you're there? Do you start from there? Do you live from that point on? Now, people tend to, as the gossip goes, and from some of my experiments, is that you lose the time travel vibration from the radionic machine. You tend to pop back into your own reality. What if you don't? So all of these things we have to look at this, and of course there's higher goals here other than making dough. So the whole idea is that there are very critical, people would kill for that knowledge. This would give huge empowerment to dictators, psychopaths, the common person out there. What good governments? So if this kind of capacity can be done, and it can be done that the general public is out there messing with a machine like this, they pull machines off the market that do anything that is a little bit too potent or potentially dangerous. But it is also amazing to me how so many things seem to mysteriously slip by regulatory agencies. People who claim more immortality by using a couple of rings never get hit for it. There's so many people that make all sorts of claims out there, and I guess they just figure these people are the lunatic fringe, and unless they get a lot of complaints, they don't bother with it. Because there is the two-sided sword of these government agencies, which seem to be awful tolerant, that seem to give people warnings. Hey, you shouldn't do that. And then they go ahead and do it, and then they wonder why they get thrown in jail. This happened to Wilhelm Reich. Of course, I think there's extenuating circumstances there. He was told not to sell his machines, and somebody in his company sold machines, and of course, he got arrested for it. So I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't looked into it. I can't spend those many hours researching details that aren't all that important. So that's the gossip that I understand out of this point. If someone wants to correct me on that, I'm more than happy to hear from you. Email me, upper right. Go to the website and you can find my email address. So the whole idea is that's how these things work. And we have to fully understand that in the bigger picture of it all. So there is an awesome. So to think that this guy is going to make a machine that I believe sold for about $475 and is still selling for similar prices out there, up to about $700. There's a copy being made by this guy down in Mexico. I don't know if anybody else is making these. I see these machines pop up, but none of these people have any skill out there to make anything, or at least to change it. There certainly are plans out there, and the average probably high school electronic guy could make this. There's nothing fancy here. There's nothing unusual. They're trying to get down to this machine was special because of some resistors and diodes in there that were made from less unusual materials. Germanium, which is what Gibbs was talking about, could be an amazing thing, is an interesting actual mineral that's been used in crystal radios and other things to kind of pick up frequencies. Certainly is not exotic. The fact is that this kind of machine, thinking that this came from extraterrestrials and everything else, is a little bit ridiculous. And certainly they could have done a lot better. But there are complications to that as well. So you take a cell phone and you give it to a guy in the 1920s now, and he'll look at you like you got 45 heads and you're insane. There's no way they could copy a cell phone, even in the 20th century that we have today. The technology doesn't exist back then. How would you make that? So that's one of the problems with getting very advanced designs from very advanced people that use different metals, different production stuff, everything that goes with that. So this is not a joke of how to do things. But the bottom line is, does it work or not? And who are the people? But we know how stupid extraterrestrials are. After all, Billy Meyer, one of the dumbest, lowest consciousness people on the planet, supposedly were contacted by extraterrestrials. And that goes pretty much with most people. The PK Man, a known alcoholic who died of liver disease. Oh, perfect. Let's communicate with him, Rockagoo. Yes, he's perfect for what we want. He's stupid. He's an ex-roadie. Work for the carnival, and he's an alcoholic. Perfect. So these are the kind of things that happen to all of these type of realities that we run into. But the bottom line is that this never worked as a time machine, never was. Is it a good feast for intellectual motivation? Well, I think it is. I think it's interesting. That's why I published this guy, and while we made it, do what you can. Maybe you can figure out how to get this to work. Maybe this stimulates a way to make your own. And, of course, we just don't know. And smart people, when they are successful, do not talk about it. And as usual, if anyone has any further information. I'm always seeking the truth. That's what Gnosis is all about. So if you have information, you have proof that you've done anything, you have proof that this machine works, well, let's see it. And I don't want to see some comic junk that's on YouTube showing some little clock. Let's see something actually work. None of that proves anything. These are all people that are paid by the disinformation agents to put out this knowledge and to keep the fantasy, the fake tech that goes with the disreputable lying cheat that Stephen Gibbs was. Plain and simple. And the people he was connected to, including the very disreputable people like Louis Theroux, and the list goes on. And it's of all the people that he connected with a bunch of bad people of the lowest possible level. And it's amazing how people would follow up on such ridiculousness, while someone who would follow up like a BBC reporter would spend the time to write a book and give an entire chapter to me. Well, isn't that a little bit ridiculous? Certainly, there is not much happening there. Why did he see fit to try and disgrace me and call me a Satanist? Why did he go and talk with Stephen Gibbs? Why was that the person he chose? I find that very interesting. It's not really interesting. It just really proves everything that I've just stated to you. And it's not proof from me. It's not my gossip. It's not somebody I pulled out from the bag. Yeah, I agree with Dr. Tower. No. How about the BBC? How about the CNN? How about all bringing in people that are making complete lies about me? And, of course, people that then go over to my competition? Isn't that interesting? And who refused to communicate? Well, it's all pretty clear what was going on with all these things. And it was just a bogus reality done by this very disturbed a person who was cheating the government, who committed fraud, and who made up a bunch of stories. And who else gives him a soapbox to stand on? The fraud, the guy who is a fraud, who's a liar, who's proved absolutely nothing? Well, one of the biggest media moguls to ever hit talk radio, and certainly the biggest to ever hit alternative talk radio. Well, isn't that interesting? It's amazing how these nobody-nothings all of a sudden are big buddies something. Just amazing. I hope that has clarified things. Until next time.